Hello and welcome to 30 Minutes of Wisdom, Rising in Consciousness and Mindfulness. My name is Oren Shai. I'm the founder of Enliven Leadership Lab. I'm a coach and consultant, and I'm so excited for this conversation that we have today, all about the way in which transformation begins with you, all about starting with yourself. And we are so fortunate today to be welcoming in Amina Zamani. So I'll just take a moment to introduce you, Amina, and I would love to have you come on and say hello. So Amina is an executive coach, author, and TEDx speaker on resilience. A visionary in the area of mindful leadership. Her passion is helping people transform their limiting beliefs into personal power. Drawing on her global upbringing across Central Asia and the US, Amina speaks on topics such as diversity and inclusion, peak performance, and emotional intelligence. Amina, welcome.
Hi.
So good to have you here. And this is a topic that is, in my opinion, over the past year and a half, when we've had, so many of us have had more of an opportunity to go inward than maybe we had had historically. There seems to be this broad recognition of the extent to which we can really propel and cause so much transformation around us by not starting by changing what's actually happening in our sphere around us, but by starting with ensuring that we're developing our own self-awareness, our own awareness of what we're bringing to the moment, and initiating whatever form of transformation we are exploring by starting with ourselves. So I'd love to just get some of your initial thoughts on this concept, and also what, if anything, you might have noticed in your world when it comes to starting with yourself and all this introspection that's been happening.
Oh God, it's so good to be here. Thank you, Warren. Oren. We also love Warren. We know him. But yeah, change is just hard, right? I mean, Oren, when you think about this idea of change, like, it's amazing. It can be super transformational, but it's hard. And it's actually hard on a neurological level. So like, I feel like we should just take a step back and even understand like the psychology of change, right? Like where we process even the idea of wanting to change is on our prefrontal cortex. Our prefrontal cortex is like where we keep all of our logic. It's our decision-making ability, right? It's that part of us that says, don't eat that cookie because you're trying to get fit. And then it's also that part of our brain that tells us you need to get fit, right? So that part of our brain really digests change. Like the problem with that, with the prefrontal cortex, is that it needs a lot of metabolic fuel. Metabolic fuel is just like energy. So our brains need a lot of energy to process change. And typically, because we're taking in so much information all at once, every day, all day, our brain needs a lot of consistency to create that change. So oftentimes you'll hear people and they'll be like, man, like I tried meditation, like I can't do it. And it's like, what do you mean you can't do it? Of course you can do it. How many times have you tried? Dude, I tried 6 times. Awesome. How about 96 times? How about 396 times, right? Like that's how change occurs. This whole idea of repetition is the solution for that resistance. So a lot of times, I feel like this is a really amazing topic. A lot of times people are like, well, what's my first step? Like the first step is to like decide. And then once you make that decision, do that same change every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so that aspect of habit building and habit formation, and understanding that if we have a certain way that we've been doing things, or in this case of meditation, not really stopping to pause and to meditate for so many years, it's going to take a little bit of repetition in order to kind of build some new neural pathways. And at the same time, what you hit on there at the end, coming back to this idea of beginning with ourselves, is there's a decision that is made where once we make that decision that we want to commit to this new behavior, to this transformation, there's a level of connection to the awareness of within us. What is some of that resistance that's present? And how do I become more aware of this so that I'm not fighting myself when it comes to making this shift that I'm looking to make?
Totally. I think about it like researchers have shown over and over, whether it's an incredibly positive change, like someone moving in with their partner, or like, getting married, or whether it's a difficult change, like making a transition, getting a divorce, changing roles, jobs, change creates like a resistance of fear. And it's all about uncertainty. Like, we don't know what the future holds, right? Have you ever heard of that term, sort of, it's called comfortably miserable? It's like, I don't have to experience any change. Right. I can stay in my comfort zone. It's not that bad. It's kind of bad, but it's not that bad.
It's familiar.
Right? It's familiar. So the reason that change is so hard is because we don't know what the other side is. Like, I'm fine living alone. If I move in with my partner, it could be really good or it could be really bad. And if it's really bad, it's worse than how it is today. And I don't want that, right? I don't want the bad change. And so that uncertainty is the natural knee-jerk reaction,
Right.
It's
right. Yeah. So let's talk more and let's unpack more of what underlies that fear.
Yeah.
Because you're someone who has an expertise around mindset and this understanding of how our belief systems can influence the degree of resistance that we might experience when it comes to making change.
Yeah.
So can you go a little bit deeper into what it is that exactly underlies that fear and how we can begin to access that?
Totally. First of all, I feel like even like Tony Robbins, and we love him, he's mastered the mindset game, right? Like, even he gets stressed. And I was listening to a talk on Tony, and he said, I just give myself timed stress. He's like, because I know that it's all psychology and it's all physiology, right? And my psychology determines my physiology. Like, he's been talking about this for 20 years, and recently Harvard did a study, and what they found is that if people stand in like the superpower pose for 2 minutes, they actually feel better, right? So you can change your state of mind through making a decision and your physiology. Like, get up and move and do a bunch of jumping jacks. I promise you'll feel less depressed, right? So like, it's having the tools to actually know what can foster a shift in our resistance, what can create that positive mindset. I know for me, I'm like very sensitive. Like, I'm a right brain, sort of artistic, sensitive person. And, I feel people's energy. Like, the empathetic side of like being a coach and understanding people's emotions, I can take that on, right? Like, I don't know, for all the empaths out there, like, it's a blessing and it can be a curse. And so I have to constantly work at this oversensitivity of meditating in the morning and afternoon to like clean my energy, to be present. I have to eat really well. I have to make sure I get enough rest. That's the other thing about change, is that if the brain can only sort of process so much information, and we need so much fuel, if you're tired, if you're lonely, if you're hungry, if you're, that can throw you off your change. So now you're exhausted, you're depressed, you're lonely, and try changing now.
Right. Right. To your point, we've got to acknowledge that with so much stimulation and so many things that we have going on and being processed at any given moment, the tools are really important. Yes. And also acknowledging, and this is something I want to make sure that we name explicitly, where you started with that example around Tony Robbins, is acknowledging that as human beings, we're going to have these experiences where the fear comes up, the doubt creeps in, we feel potentially too fatigued to be able to move forward in that moment. And it's what happens in that moment and the extent to which we're willing to have some, not only compassion for ourselves, but making sure we're allowing ourselves the space to be aware and attentive to, okay, what do I really need right now?
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard. How many times have you had an experience where, like, I feel funny, I feel weird, and it's like, what am I feeling? I don't know. Like, how do you actually know how you're feeling? And I think, like, that's the first step. And so oftentimes when I work with clients and I talk to them about their feelings and emotions, I'm like, hey, take your hand, put it on your heart, close your eyes, and just get a sense, like, put words to your feeling. What am I feeling? I feel afraid. I feel scared. I'm so afraid of rejection. I'm so afraid of looking bad. I'm so terrified. Like that's the first step, like 12-step style. It's like, I'm admitting that this is a thing. And I think we have a lot of shame around our negative emotions, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's why people are like, yeah, I'm good. It's cool. No. Yeah. It's like, no, how are you really? No, man, I'm good. Yeah. It's like very vulnerable to admit that I am not well. I'm scared. I'm vulnerable. I tried this. I failed, and I feel awful.
Yeah.
Like, that's great if you can acknowledge that emotion. That's the process of change. That's like the change curve, right? Is like admitting I'm afraid. And then the second step is, what if I didn't have this emotion? What if I felt like I wasn't a victim? What if I felt the fear?
What else is possible?
Yeah, what else is possible? Like, actually having that tool to admit it, but then challenging it. That's the second step. I think so many times we're so afraid to admit it that we can't even get to that step of challenging it, so we're frozen.
And afraid to admit it, not just publicly, but to admit it to ourselves.
For sure. I mean, the public is great, but it's like, how we admit it to ourselves is the key, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like me, and me. Like, that's the relationship I have.
So let's talk more about that, specifically when it comes to some people and clients that I work with, where when we have moved through our lives, being in some way disconnected from feeling and from understanding the layers of emotionality and having a language to describe the layers of emotionality that we experience as human beings, it can be really challenging at first. To the example you gave, it can be confusing and it can be challenging to say, here's how I'm feeling. And that's where it's really easy to breeze past that and to say, oh, I'm feeling sad, moving on. But to have this deeper level of connection to our internal experience, this is where what we're talking about in terms of transformation, whether it's personal or professional, begins to overlap with our healing as human beings. And so I'd love to just hear some of your thoughts around that intersection and what you've seen in terms of where healing comes into this picture.
No, for sure. And I love that question, because the idea of healing, really the definition is restoring a part of you that has been hurt, and so you get to heal a wound, like, physically, but we have a lot of wounds inside that we're trying to hide, right? So healing comes, I think, with safety. My heritage is Afghani. So I was born in Pakistan. My nationality is Afghani, and we moved to the US when I was around 6.5, 7 years old. And so there is trauma associated to moving countries, not knowing a language, being dislocated, right? You're moving to a completely different culture, and you're basically coming from a place where you feel like an outsider. And do I fit in? And we want to try, our brains want to assimilate as soon as possible so I can fit in, so I can feel less vulnerable, right? So I want to dress like the American people. I want to speak like them with no accent. I want to fit in so I'm safe. But in the idea of assimilation, we actually wound ourselves, because the definition of assimilation is actually giving up a part of where you were to assimilate to the new. All of us in life, whether you're an immigrant like me or something else, have disassociated parts of ourselves we've given up to have love, to feel safe, to feel a part of. And those are wounds inside of us. This is why people have eating disorders, right? So much of body image is related to feeling a part of rather than the actual physicality. So much of emotionality is suppressed emotion, right? Depression is suppressed emotion. And so the idea of healing tends to be something that, like, well, somebody was very traumatized, they need to heal. I don't need to heal. Right. And sometimes I think people think it's selfish, like, oh God, I don't want to take up more space. I don't need this time. I don't need to heal. I've never had trauma. I promise you, we've all had trauma, dude. Like, I don't care who you are. Living in this world causes trauma. If you've never had trauma, then you going through COVID was traumatic, right? So we need to understand the wounds inside of ourselves, and each wound is specific to ourselves. So reading that book about, fix your wounds, fix your life, okay, maybe that helps. But if it's not your wound, or if it's not your trauma, that may not fit you. So like I said about the decision-making process, is get really clear. We can gain awareness through meditation. Honestly, one of the best ways to gain awareness about what's wrong is just journaling. First thing in the morning, 2 pages, right? I need to do that more. But like, first, understand what's happening inside of here. And this will give you the answer of what's causing that fear. And once you understand what's causing that fear, then you can understand actually the steps you need to take to change. Change is out here. The internal work is in here. The reason we stop change is because we're stuck here. Because somebody told me that I didn't have a good singing voice and I never pursued singing. I mean, this isn't true, but whatever, right? Like, I'm not into singing. But if somebody told me that, I would be afraid and I'd be stuck, and I could never change that habit. So recognizing what that wound is the first step to healing.
Yes.
And talking about it, journaling about it can help us heal. And as we begin to heal, change is easier.
Right. We feel a greater sense of wholeness that supports whatever it is that we're looking to build. We're building then on top of a more stable foundation.
Yeah, man. Stability is tough. It's hard. It's so hard. And I can't say I get it right all the time, but that's why we need tactical tools and routine.
This is the practice we're in.
Yeah.
And there are a couple things that I want to make sure that we hit on as well before, or that we reinforce before moving forward, which one of those things is the way in which we all, no matter how we perceive our history, and what makes us who we are, we have all experienced levels of stress that are beyond what the human body can process in a given moment or unit of time, where it requires that additional intentionality to creating space, to cultivating practices where we can make sure that we are processing the experience, that we are finding a way to release, and this is physiological, emotional, energetic, releasing the tension that is held within the body and mind as we move through life. And so I want to just hit on that and get your thoughts on this notion in particular, where for so long our culture really emphasized or encouraged this ability to brute force our way through and to just take pride in all the hardship that we've experienced and show that we can be successful despite that. And while there's nothing wrong, of course, it's beautiful to move beyond these challenging experiences that we've had. What we do want to make sure that we are being attentive to is, have we allowed ourselves the opportunity to understand how this series of experiences actually manifests in the body and in the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Whew, it's a big topic. It's a big topic. Where do you want to go with that? I feel like there's a lot of avenues that we could go. Where do you think, I know you're really into sort of somatic work. I know you're into body work. I know you're into that consistency, like that creates the healing. What do you think is a good starting point for people? I'm wondering.
Yeah, you know what I'd love to bring this back to, because we are talking about transformation beginning with you, starting with yourself.
Yeah.
Where that can easily be, how that can easily be interpreted in our culture is, okay, I'm going to fully own my healing journey and I'm going to find a way and I'm going to do it on my own.
Yeah.
And recognizing,
Right.
and this is more and more of the research on trauma, on PTSD,
right.
on our neurobiology.
That's right.
Emphasizes that our healing involves community. It is not just about moving through it ourselves.
Yes, I know. This is why I love coaches. Because coaching really works. I believe in therapy. I think all models work, right? But there's something so independent and beautiful about doing your own personal work, going deep inside, meditating, having that practice. And I'm a big proponent of it. There's also a lot of research about being witnessed. That's why group therapy, 12-step recovery, that kind of thing is so powerful, where one person shares and you're witnessed. That can create healing, because a lot of times as children, we're neglected. We're not seen by our parents fully, right? Like they see you, but they don't see the totality of your magic. So we feel like we have to kind of be somebody else. So the idea of getting support, even if it's from your best friend, is a starting point, right? It's like, first of all, you got to know what you're feeling. You have that discomfort. And look, even if you don't know, if you're like, hey, I don't know what I'm feeling, but like, Oren, could you just listen to me for 10 minutes? Like we need people in our lives that are safe like that. Like for somebody just to say, look, I need some help. I'm not okay. I need to talk about this. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is doing some modality that can create release, right? For you, I know you're into yoga. I know you're into somatic body work. Whatever community-based work you can do to get that support so you're not alone is critical for change. I mean, a lot of times in business, we talk about accountability, right? And you have people that are holding you accountable to create that change. We need that external reference, and we need that internal reference to create the real sort of lasting change. So it's both. And that's why it takes so much time. This idea of like self-care, #self-care, it is hard AF. You know why? Because it takes as much work as anything else. Which is why, people like Ariana Huffington are like, hey, get enough sleep, take care of yourself, because if we start deteriorating ourselves, we can't give. So that consistent routine. I mean, for me, what I do every day, I've been meditating for 15 years. I mean, while I was in college, I was meditating. I have never missed a meditation. That is my church. I think I meditated almost 6,000 times. Like every day I wake up, I drink some water, I meditate. The first thing I do. And then I do a little bit of yoga just to get my mind right. Then I go about my day, do my thing. And then in the afternoon, I do another meditation. The practice I use is TM. Oren, I know you use TM. But that is the foundation. Other than that, I have a coach. I work with a coach. I do my journaling. This other thing that seems kind of crazy, but there's a lot of research shown on this, is affirmations. Looking at yourself in the mirror and just saying something super positive to yourself. Like, I'm proud of you. I love you. It feels so like, who's that guy? Like Richard Simmons or whatever. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
cool and people like me and like, whatever. There's some real neurological shift to that.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain can't tell the difference between a state and a visualization. So when you remember something or when you visualize it, your brain thinks it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get a feeling of feeling amazing, of being in that superpower, when you feel great, your brain is programming that into happiness. So we need to force that happiness sometimes. I mean, not aggressively, but strategically.
So here's what can be some of the where we can approach this transformation with some level of exploration and
Yeah.
curiosity and fun, where part of this journey is exploring and determining, okay, what are my practices? What works for me? And we try on different practices. Just like if somebody has ever gone to a yoga class, maybe those first couple of teachers you took class with didn't really jive for you in that time, and then you took a different teacher and you were suddenly like, okay, here's my practice, here's my yoga.
Yeah.
Similarly, when it comes to meditation, or when it comes to our community, when it comes to the coach or therapist who supports us, when it comes to the friend who we can turn to and also in turn be support for in this way, part of this journey of self-transformation is some of that experimentation and exploration. And we can choose to approach that with some lightness, some levity, some uh, acknowledgement that we don't actually know until we begin experimenting what's going to support me. And what supports me the most today might actually be a bit different 5 years from now.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. It that process could evolve. The key is just pick. If you want to try meditation, stick to it for a while. If you wanna work with a coach, stick with them for a while. You know, change doesn't happen right away. It could, but we're gonna need other changes and other changes to evolve and grow. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the consistency vibe.
Yes. Yeah. That consistency and that just acknowledgement that we're going to have experiences that are sticky along the way, where we feel like maybe this kind of starting with myself is not for me. Maybe I should go back to kind
Yeah,
of being a little bit less aware. And that is part of where community and having other
yeah,
people alongside you on this journey becomes really powerful. So you can move through that together.
totally. It's become super in and fashionable now to have a community and be vulnerable, right? Like, no longer like, I think, like, there's some pockets of shame, but more and more people are beginning to realize the power of it. Everyone's got a shaman and a therapist, their coach. Awesome. Keep it up.
Yeah. Yeah, love it. So as we close out now, or begin to wind down, I would love to just get some of your take or your advice for those listening or watching around this idea of finding your people, enrolling your
Yeah.
people in your to be your support structure, especially where I know early on in my journey, I didn't necessarily feel like I had somebody around me that I could open up to in this way. What are your thoughts around that?
Totally. Again, like, I don't have an easy answer, right? Some of us are extroverted, some of us are introverted, some of us have a million friends, others just have a handful. I think it's more of a feeling based thing. Who are the people that lift me up? Who are the people that I feel safe around? That's my barometer of, like, okay, this feels good, this feels safe, I'm going to keep going. No, this doesn't feel safe. Wow, they said something super judgmental, not going there. Our
Mm-hmm.
egos, are so fragile. So being around people that can make you feel safe, and even if that is a therapist or a family member or your best friend, that's the starting point. And then building and having that model of, what is my formula for safety? I need to feel like I'm not judged. I need to feel like someone's not talking down to me, telling me what to do. I need to feel like they see me as I want to be seen if I'm not behaving that way. You know,
Yeah.
I want you to see me as who I want to be, man. I want to be an amazing person of service. If I'm not being that way, lift me back up there.
Yes.
That's how I know that you're part of my community.
Safety in being seen in the beautiful and aspirational aspects, and the mess and the challenge and the strife, and being seen in all of
Yeah.
it. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Amina, thank you so much for being here with us
Yay.
today, sharing your thoughts on transforming, beginning with you. Meet us here every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern for 30 minutes of wisdom. Thank you all so much for being here.
Bye.